"You're nothing compared to the woman my mom is." The cutting remark from my daughter-in-law, Valerie, hung in the air that night while I brought out the dessert I'd poured my heart into preparing. A heavy quiet settled over the dining area. My pulse raced wildly. On impulse, I slid my chair away and shot back, "Well, maybe she should cover your rent instead." My son, Robert, turned ashen. "Rent? What are you talking about?" he shouted, his eyes bulging. Right then, I realized everything was on the verge of shifting dramatically, and that bombshell was merely the start of a tale that caught everyone off guard. I'm Shirley, 70 years young. That evening marked the moment I learned a mother's boundless affection could turn into her biggest vulnerability. For half a year, I'd been quietly covering the $800 monthly rent on the place where Robert and Valerie resided. I figured it was my role to support my boy amid his money woes. It never crossed my mind that as I drained my nest egg, they viewed me as a drag, a lesser figure they could belittle with impunity. Things had kicked off 6 months prior when Robert showed up at my door, eyes brimming with tears, sharing how he'd been let go, and they were falling behind on bills. "Mom, it's just temporary till I land a new gig," he'd promised in that cracked tone that always melted my resolve. True to any devoted parent, I didn't pause for a breath. I tapped into my hard-earned savings, the funds I'd scraped together bit by bit during decades as a seamstress, and began footing their rent, all without Valerie finding out. "Let's keep it between us, Mom," Robert had begged. "I don't want her feeling ashamed about relying on you." How foolish I was to think he was shielding her dignity, when really he was safeguarding his role as the breadwinner. As I scrimped on every cent to bail them out, they carried on like life was unchanged. Dining out, splurging on outfits, even dreaming up getaways I could tell were beyond their means. That night's meal felt like a treat. I devoted the whole day to whipping up his go-to dish, chicken and mushroom gravy, veggie rice, and the vanilla custard he'd adored since childhood. The table gleamed with the crystal stemware passed down from my mom and the silverware reserved for rare celebrations. Valerie swept in, wearing a sleek red gown and heels that likely topped my food budget for the month. From the second they entered, the atmosphere felt off. Valerie flashed that phony grin I recognized, the one signaling trouble ahead. Robert acted jittery, dodging my look and fiddling endlessly with his device. Over the courses, talk grew strained. Valerie picked at it all. The dish warmth, my furnishings, even the living room's aroma diffuser. "Don't you figure it's due for a little update around here?" she'd said in that patronizing drawl that grated on me. My mom's spot is way more up to date, with all those chic, sparse accents. I forced a grin to keep the peace. Deep down, though, my frustration built. That home had been mine for 30 years. Each item carried echoes of the past. Every nook whispered memories. As dessert rolled around, I hoped for a warm close. I'd crafted the custard with extra tenderness, recalling how Robert would gobble it down young, declaring me the top chef ever. Yet instead of thanks, those barbs stabbed deep into me. "You're nothing compared to the woman my mom is." The blow landed like a stinging smack. I halted, spoon hovering, a wave of feeling clogging my throat. Valerie smirked with malice, like she'd plotted the whole evening to wound me. Robert stared at his plate, shunning contact. In a flash, I sensed he'd colluded in her scheme. "Pardon," I stammered, voice quaking, even as I knew her words rang clear. Valerie reclined smugly, as if claiming my space, and drove the knife deeper. "You caught it, right? My mom built her fortune solo, a powerhouse, self-reliant, no handouts needed. She's got her business, a seaside retreat in Florida, jaunts across Europe. You're just handy with pots and needles." Every syllable crushed me further. My mind raced to the countless hours from dawn till midnight, stitching gowns for quinceañeras, tweaking tuxes for weddings, crafting linens for strangers' vows, while my own dreams stayed stitched away. I recalled the vigils through Robert's boyhood illnesses, hawking my scant trinkets for his schooling, pulling extra hours so he'd lack for nothing. "Valerie, enough," Robert whispered feebly, too timid to stand up for me properly. That feeble plea stung worse than quiet as it sealed. He admitted that he sided with his wife, admitting he'd joined in on this orchestrated embarrassment. My boy, the same one who'd once called me his hero, was now letting them treat me like hired help right in my own house. "No, Robert, hold on. Let me wrap this up." Valerie pressed on in that shrill tone she pulled out to act all high and mighty. "Your mom has to face reality. My own mother would have never let her child settle for this kind of average life." She waved her hand dismissively toward my dining area, the spot filled with so many cherished moments. She would have stepped in to help us upgrade. She wouldn't have trapped us in hardship with her phony compassion. That's when a fire ignited deep within me. It wasn't only the unfairness of her accusations, but the sheer thanklessness from folks who'd been coasting on my goodwill without a clue. Over the past 6 months, I'd covered the shelter above their entitled roofs. I'd skipped my arthritis meds to make sure they had a cozy setup. I pushed back from my seat gradually, a surge of energy hitting me like it hadn't in ages. "Fine, Valerie," I responded with a steadiness that caught even me off guard. "If your mom is that outstanding, if she's such a finer person than I am, then maybe it's her turn to handle the duties that come with real achievement." Robert stared at me in bewilderment, but Valerie held onto her cocky grin like she'd claimed victory. "Right on, Shirley. Good to see you're grasping your role here." "Oh, I get my role crystal clear," I shot back, my tone sharpening word by word. "And it doesn't involve shelling out the $900 monthly for your place at 420 Hamilton Street, Unit 3 anymore." The quiet that dropped was profound enough to catch the tick of the kitchen timer. Robert jumped to his feet, toppling his glass of water in the process. "Rent! What rent?" he shouted, eyes bulging, gazing at me like I'd switched to another tongue. "Mom, what on earth are you saying?" Valerie's superior smirk had evaporated. Now she eyed me with a blend of dread and bewilderment that brought me a rush of quiet triumph. "The rent I've faithfully covered each month starting from February," I went on, relishing their stunned reactions. $900 straight from my account on the 5th of every month, plus the extra $100 the landlord tacks on for electronic transfers. A full $1,000 so you could lounge in ease while showing me such disdain. Robert slumped back into his seat like his knees had given out. "But you said you'd sorted it with the landlord, that he'd cut you some slack to scrape the cash together," he muttered, his words fracturing. Valerie glared at him with an anger I'd never witnessed, as though he was the one who'd wrecked her big reveal. "I wasn't honest," I confessed, zero regret in my voice. "I fibbed because I believed I was supporting my child. I figured it was short-term. I hoped you'd value the effort one day. But it's obvious now that to you, I'm merely a foolish elderly lady ripe for mockery." Valerie attempted to pull herself together, but her earlier bravado had fizzled. "Of course I had no idea. Robert never mentioned you were footing the bill," she faltered. But I cut her off with a raised palm. "Save your justification, sweetheart. If your mother's everything you claim, she'll jump at the chance to handle this. After all, someone so accomplished and self-reliant wouldn't balk at covering rent for her daughter and her husband, right?" The sarcasm dripping from my words made even Robert wince. The air in the dining room hung heavy, almost tangible. Valerie darted looks between Robert and me, her brain clearly whirring through the fallout of her discovery. Robert's fingers shook and sweat beaded on his brow. "Mom, why keep it from me?" he managed at last, voice splintering. "Why let me think you'd negotiated with the landlord?" His words hung in the room like a raw wound. "I wasn't truthful because you're my boy, Robert. When you showed up at my door in tears, saying you'd lost it all and couldn't even afford groceries, I couldn't just stand there while the kid I brought up, the man I cherish beyond my own existence, endured that pain." Valerie stayed quiet, but I could tell her thoughts were spinning wildly over what I'd exposed. The flush from her pricey cosmetics had faded from her face, leaving her pale and drawn. Robert raked his fingers through his hair, that old habit from childhood whenever anxiety gripped him. I wasn't up front, I pressed on, my resolve hardening. Because I saw it as brief. Because I trusted that once you got back on your feet with steady work, you'd show some gratitude. I never dreamed that as I skimped on my arthritis treatments, as I cut out meat to stretch that $900 monthly, you both were scheming to tear me down in my very own home. Robert attempted to cut in, but I lifted my palm to hush him. No, it's your turn to hear me out now, Robert. Over the past 6 months, my dinners have consisted of nothing but rice and eggs. I've kept wearing those same worn-out shoes since I couldn't afford replacements. And do you realize what I resorted to last week? I parted with your dad's wedding band, that cherished keepsake I'd held onto for so long just to cover your rent and stock my kitchen with basics. My eyes filled with moisture, but it was fury burning there, not sorrow. I let go of the sole tangible reminder of my spouse, the one who'd cherished me for 3 decades, to prop up a pair who viewed me as beneath them, average and undeserving of dignity. Valerie managed to speak up at last, her tone faint and unsteady. I had no idea, she began. Robert hadn't mentioned that you were covering things, but I silenced her with a glare sharp enough to forge metal. Naturally, you were in the dark, sweetheart, since your spouse opted to deceive you as well. He'd rather you think he'd hustled the cash himself than confess he relied on his mom. Average. I hurled the term with such bitterness that Valerie flinched back noticeably. Robert burst out then. Mom, this wasn't how I pictured it. You pushed for it. I never requested such heavy losses. His plea carried a frantic edge, reminiscent of a kid busted for fibbing, yet it only stoked my anger higher. Pushed for it, I shouted, my restraint shattering at last. You showed up at my door bawling like a kindergartner. You confessed you couldn't even buy loaves of bread, that Valerie wept nightly from the embarrassment of unpaid utilities. What sort of parent turns away in that moment? The quiet that settled was crushing. Robert shot Valerie a blaming glance, which she mirrored fiercely. It was obvious secrets and deceptions lurked on both ends, with full candor lacking between them. The deepest wound, Robert. I pressed on, sensing hot trails down my lined face. It isn't the cash. It isn't the giving up. It's how, during every visit these months, disdain flickered in your gaze. Valerie picked apart my dwelling, my meals, my outfits, my ways, all unaware that my funds kept her sheltered. And you simply allowed it. Robert edged closer, but I retreated a pace. Mom, just hear me out. Nothing requires clarification, I snapped curtly. The truth has spilled already. Your partner deems me not even close to her mom's caliber. Fine, then let her mom prove her worth by handling her duties. Valerie mustered some boldness to chime in, her words still quivering. My comments were they slipped out in a heated instant. I was troubled by separate issues. I broke in with a harsh chuckle. Troubled by dining in the residence of the lady footing your housing. Troubled by faking politeness towards someone you see as so lowly. The atmosphere hung thick, almost tangible, like you could slice through it. Robert prowled the eating area like a trapped beast as Valerie fidgeted with a cloth in her shaky grip. Do you grasp the most heartbreaking aspect here? I went on, a peculiar serenity washing over me. I truly thought of us as kin. When I wed your dad, Robert, I envisioned a brood of kids, with little ones scampering about this place amid joyful meals brimming with warmth and joy. After endless attempts to conceive, your arrival felt like heaven's ultimate blessing. Robert halted, meeting my eyes with his own brimming. Mom, my affection for you is real. You know that. Affection goes beyond sayings, my boy. It's deeds, it's honor, it's shielding. When your partner belittles me and you hold your tongue, when you permit her to degrade me within these walls, when you mislead me to conceal your financial reliance on me, that's not affection, that's expediency. Valerie rose suddenly, toppling her seat. "I've had it. I won't endure this lecture." "Robert, we're out of here." Her tone reclaimed a bit of its typical haughtiness, though fear danced in her look. "No," Robert declared resolutely, catching us off guard. "We stay put until we resolve this. Mom, take a seat. Let's discuss it maturely." Yet I'd already resolved it. "No more words needed, Robert. Everything's laid bare. Your spouse has voiced her disdain for me plainly, and you've demonstrated alignment. From tomorrow, I cease the rent payments. If Valerie's mom is the paragon she claims, doubtless she'll step in to assist." "But Mom, you can't," Robert wailed. And for the first evening span, genuine dread flashed in his stare. "We lack the funds. I lost my job 2 weeks back. I plan to mention it post-meal." Robert's revelation struck the room like an explosion. "Lost your job 2 weeks ago," I echoed. Gradually, a fresh surge of treachery surged through me, and you kept it all from me. You let your wife degrade me, even though you relied on me entirely. My voice cracked on that final word, not out of sorrow, but from an anger so deep it made my fingers quiver. Valerie spun toward Robert, her gaze burning with outrage. "What? You got dismissed from your job 2 weeks back, and you said nothing. I've been throwing cash around like nothing's wrong while you—" She trailed off, unable to complete the thought. She covered her face with her palms and started weeping theatrically, just like a performer in a daytime drama. "Valerie, hear me out," Robert started, but she silenced him with a sharp intake of breath. "Don't suggest I relax. Only yesterday I splurged on those $400 heels. Last week I reserved the spa treatment for my birthday. Robert, we're bankrupt, and you watched me act like a fool." Her crying had smeared her cosmetics entirely, leaving her appearing just as she truly was, a frantic and fearful woman. I observed the bizarre unfolding, caught between a peculiar sense of relief and hurt. For months, I'd shouldered the burden of sustaining this pair, and at last, they confronted the truth of their mess. Robert appeared utterly broken, his posture sagging and his features buried in his palms. "Do you realize the saddest aspect of this whole ordeal, Robert?" I remarked, my composure startling even myself. "Even after uncovering your deceptions and the way you've shamed me, my initial urge is still to offer aid. That's the essence of motherhood, my boy. That's the nature of love without conditions." Robert lifted his head to meet my eyes, and briefly, I glimpsed the young child who'd rushed to me during night terrors. "Mom, I got let go because I showed up late 3 times straight. Valerie was unwell and I needed to look after her. Drive her to the physician." But Valerie interrupted with a glare full of venom. "I wasn't unwell. I had sessions with my skin specialist for cosmetic procedures. Don't drag me into your excuses for being unreliable." Her facade had shattered utterly. The refined, haughty lady who'd stepped into my home was gone, exposing a crude and panicked individual. "Cosmetic procedures," I questioned, stunned. "So you're claiming my son got fired for chauffeuring you to pampering sessions while I pawned my jewels to cover your shelter?" A harsh, chilling chuckle burst from me, startling myself. Robert stepped closer, extending his arms in supplication. "Mom, I beg you, I recognize my errors. I know I've let you down, but you can't leave us stranded now. We have no place to turn. Valerie's folks are overseas." And Valerie broke in once more. "My folks aren't overseas. They're right here in the city. You instructed me to assure you everything was okay, to spare them concern. Lie upon lie peeled away, like the skins of a spoiled bulb. And just how many positions have you squandered, Robert?" I inquired in a whisper so faint it was almost inaudible. "How often have you deceived me?" The quiet that ensued rang in my ears. Robert avoided my stare, and Valerie had resumed her weeping, though now it rang truer, as though she'd grasped the full scope of their predicament. 3 positions over the past 2 years. Robert confessed at last, his tone fracturing. "I kept inventing reasons. I always insisted it was short-lived, that firms were cutting staff. He halted, fixing me with those eyes that had once defined my existence. Mom, I struggle with something serious. I believe it's a genuine issue. For the first time that evening, a flicker of empathy stirred within me. My boy wasn't merely dishonest. He required expert support. Yet that empathy couldn't undo the disloyalty. It failed to mend the gashes inflicted by his statements and his spouse's barbs on my soul. Robert, I uttered deliberately, acknowledging your issue marks the initial move, but I can't continue serving as your fallback while you refuse to alter course. I can't persist in forfeiting my security to uphold an existence built on falsehoods. Valerie rose suddenly, dabbing her eyes with the cuff of her crimson gown. This is absurd, Shirley. You're his parent. Parents don't forsake their offspring. Mine would never treat me this way. The haughtiness crept back into her speech like protective plating. Your parent has avoided this because you've concealed the facts from her, I countered with frosty steadiness. And you're correct on one point, Valerie. Parents don't forsake their offspring, but I'm not forsaking my boy. I'm halting his exploitation of me. Robert drew near and clasped my hands in his. They felt icy and unsteady. Mom, I swear I'll transform. I'll seek assistance. I'll secure employment. I'll set everything straight this round. Grant me just one final opportunity. I gazed at those hands, once tiny that I'd cradled as he took his first steps, when shadows frightened him, when solace followed his bad dreams. Robert, how many final opportunities have I already extended? How often have you repeated this vow to me? He offered no reply, for we shared the knowledge. I'd forgotten the tally of instances when we'd shared this identical exversation, filled with shattered vows and dashed dreams. Your lease expires next month, I declared, easing my hands away from his grasp. You've got 30 days to figure things out. Beyond that, I won't handle your living arrangements anymore. Valerie charged toward the exit. Come on, Robert. I'm not lingering here to get shamed by a lady who has no clue about family bonds. But Robert stayed put. Valerie, feel free to leave if you'd like. I have to speak with my mother. His tone carried a resolve I hadn't detected in ages, and briefly, only briefly, I caught a spark of the person he might have become. Valerie froze upon hearing Robert's statement. She pivoted gradually, her face blending shock and raw anger. You're telling me to exit after all I've given up for this union. Her pitch turned piercing, nearly frenzied, as her hands waved like she was leading a phantom symphony. Valerie, calm down. I must resolve this with my mom. Events this evening have spiraled too far. Robert attempted to clarify, yet she interrupted him with a sharp intake of breath that likely roused the whole neighborhood. No, I'm staying put. If you're going to beg like a mutt before your mother, you'll do it with me present. She folded her arms and rooted herself in the middle of my dining area, resembling a monument to defiance. Moreover, this discussion impacts me too. If she halts our rent payments, where do we end up? A shelter for the homeless. I observed the unfolding drama with equal parts intrigue and dread. In one evening, the flawless image this pair had constructed had collapsed, exposing the deceptions they'd spun for months. It resembled witnessing a vehicle collision unfold gradually, awful yet utterly captivating. Valerie, I interjected at last, I believe you've voiced plenty for tonight. You've spelled out your opinion of me plainly, and I've done the same regarding you both. Little else remains to cover. Oh, there's plenty left to hash out, she screeched, her complexion matching the crimson of her outfit. You can't destroy our existence merely because a remark upset you. Families pardon. Families stand by one another. The irony in her declaration hit me like a sharp blow. Families stand by one another, I echoed deliberately. You refer to how you've backed me this evening, or how Robert has backed me through deceit about his job. Perhaps how you've backed me by allowing me to drain my savings as you pretend all is well. Robert slumped into a dining seat, burying his face in his palms. Mom, I realize we've committed grave errors. I know we've wounded you irreparably, but if you abandon us now, we're truly out of options. That's no longer my concern, I shot back, the edge in my words startling me as well. Over 70 years, I've tended to everyone else. I looked after my parents until their passing. I nursed your father during his sickness. I've nurtured you from your first breath. Can you recall the last instance anyone tended to me? When did someone last fret over my welfare? The ensuing quiet hung heavy and agonizing. Robert raised his gaze to meet mine, wearing a look I hadn't glimpsed since his childhood days. That blend of remorse and insight that surfaced when he grasped the depth of his wrongdoing. Never, he confessed in a whisper. I've never considered caring for you. I took for granted your constant presence, your perpetual okayness, your endless capacity to fix every issue. Valerie appeared to tire of this heartfelt exchange. Spare us the theatrics, Shirley. You're the parent. It's your duty to aid your child. You can't simply opt out of motherhood. That remark proved the breaking point. I advanced on Valerie until our faces were mere inches apart. As I addressed her, my tone dropped to a grave whisper that made her flinch backward on instinct. Don't you dare dictate what sort of parent I ought to be. I've parented for 35 years. I've forfeited my early years, my aspirations, my chances, my funds, my vitality, everything for my boy. What have you given up? Your spa sessions, your $400 footwear. Valerie opened her mouth to retort, but I pressed on relentlessly. Parenting isn't about serving as an endless cash machine. Parenting isn't about enduring insults and disdain. Parenting involves guiding your offspring toward accountability, self-reliance, and courtesy. And there, I've evidently fallen short. Robert rose suddenly, toppling his seat. Don't claim that. You've been an exceptional parent. The fault lies with me. I botched it all. Indeed, Robert, you did falter. Yet I faltered too by permitting this to escalate so much, by allowing you to evolve into a fellow who deceives his spouse, deceives his parent, and permits the woman who reared him to face degradation. Tears flowed freely down my face, yet my voice held steady. Valerie began pacing the dining room floor, restless as a trapped beast. This is a total disaster, a total disaster. Mothers-in-law are meant to support their daughters-in-law. We ought to function as a united family. Family. I cut her off with a sharp, cynical chuckle. Have you ever acted like I'm part of the family, Valerie? Have you ever offered me kindness, regard, or even basic courtesy? Ever since you first encountered Robert, you viewed me as a nuisance, a bothersome hurdle to endure just to please your spouse. That's simply not the case, she objected. Yet her tone rang hollow, without any real belief. Not the case, I replied, folding my arms tightly. Recall last Christmas when you proposed it might be wiser for you to celebrate the holidays solo, since I couldn't grasp current customs. Or the time I volunteered to prepare a meal for your anniversary, only for you to insist on opting for something classier. What about when you mocked my choice of that beloved purple gown, claiming women of my years should stick to muted shades? With each instance I listed, it felt like a tiny cut, and I noticed Robert wince at every recollection. He'd witnessed every one of those moments. He'd listened to all the cutting remarks, yet he'd stayed silent, never once standing up for me. Valerie, I pressed on, you've never truly desired involvement in this household. You've longed for this household to vanish, leaving you sole possession of Robert. Well, bravo. It seems you're about to claim precisely what you've craved. Robert stepped closer, his eyes brimming with moisture. Mom, if that's your choice, Shirley, then so be it. But don't expect sympathy from me once you grasp that you've driven away your sole child for good. When you're isolated in this aging home, encircled by your faded recollections, regretting how you expelled your loved ones over your foolish ego. Her statements were crafted to inflict pain, to stir remorse, to shatter my determination. And briefly, They nearly succeeded. The vision of solitude in this place, no visits, no calls, no one relying on me, filled me with dread. Valerie's declarations reverberated through the dining room like a hex targeting my deepest dread: isolation. For an instant, the scene she described gripped my thoughts. I pictured myself in this vacant house, devoid of grandchildren's joy that never arrived, without weekly chats on Sundays, without a soul to mark my birthday. The quiet among us grew thick and heavy, and I sensed Robert observing, hoping my steadfastness would crumble. But then an unexpected shift occurred. Rather than terror or defeat, a profound, freeing serenity washed over me. "Listen, Valerie," I uttered deliberately, relishing every syllable. "I choose solitude with dignity over companionship laced with shame. I'll take my dusty remembrances of a joyful union and decades of sincere labor over fabricating fresh ones rooted in deceit and disdain." Valerie's eyes fluttered several times, as though caught off guard by my retort. Robert's jaw dropped slightly. He was gradually realizing his final ploy of emotional manipulation had utterly backfired. "Moreover," I went on, a fresh vigor surging within me, "I won't be quite as isolated as you imagine. Only yesterday I received a phone call that altered my world, but you both were too occupied scheming ways to demean me this evening for me to mention it. It was Michael Jenkins on the line. The mention detonated in the dining room like an atomic blast. Robert went rigid, and for the first time that evening, Valerie stood utterly mute. Michael was my college sweetheart, the fellow I'd intended to wed before crossing paths with Robert's dad. He was a driven, sharp-minded individual who'd chosen to relocate to the U.S. for greater prospects while I opted to remain and build a home. "Michael Jenkins!" Robert whispered, his tone quivering. "The Michael from those pictures. Your old flame from school." I inclined my head gradually, savoring the looks of complete astonishment on their features. None other. It seems that after 4 decades of developing an engineering firm in Seattle, after nurturing 3 thriving children and grieving his wife's passing 2 years back, he chose to reconnect with past acquaintances. He spotted me online via social media, and we've been chatting by phone over the last 2 weeks. Valerie at last recovered her speech, though it emerged choked. "What do you mean by chatting?" Her complexion had drained to an unpleasant pale green that clashed horribly with her. "I mean just that. We've conversed daily, sharing stories from bygone days, updating on our paths, our realized and abandoned aspirations, and just last evening he extended a proposal that left me stunned." Robert edged nearer with uncertain strides. "What sort of proposal, Mom?" I grinned truly for the first time that night, a smile rising from my core. He asked me to join him for a month in his Seattle residence. He mentioned wanting to reveal Washington State to me, present his children, and that he's long pondered what might have transpired if I reuniting with a guy I haven't laid eyes on in 4 decades. Suppose he's running a con. Suppose he's feeding you lies. Suppose, Robert... I cut him off with an unexpected edge in my voice. "Suppose he ends up being a deceiver, exactly like you. Suppose he exploits me the way you already have. At least with Michael, it'll be an exciting journey, discovering fresh spots and being appreciated for my true self, not for the money I can shell out." Valerie had slumped into a seat, burying her face in her palms. "This isn't real. It's a bad dream. You're not actually planning to run off with some unknown guy. Michael isn't unknown to me. He understands my aspirations, my worries, my wishes because we confided in each other back in our youth. He knows I long to explore the world, that I yearn to gaze at the Pacific Ocean, that I fantasized about penning a memoir on my days as a dressmaker. Do you recall what his opening words were on that phone call? He remarked, "I truly hope you've pursued every ambition, since you merit a remarkable existence." Tears started flowing down my face, but they were happy ones, not sorrowful. "When did either of you last inquire about my ambitions? When did you last give a damn about my contentment, my aspirations, or what I might want from this life? Robert attempted to step closer, but I held up my palm to halt him. Michael shared pictures of his home, his yard bursting with vibrant orange and yellow blooms, the sea vista from his porch. He described his European getaways, the novels he's devoured, the weekly Friday meals he prepares for buddies. And get this, he also mentioned. Valerie raised her gaze toward me, her eyes puffy and brimming with bitterness. What else did he mention? He said a lady of my years and background is like a gem. He noted, I've got tales to share, insights to offer, and affection to bestow. He assured me that any fellow would count himself fortunate for my presence, my chats, my warmth. My voice cracked a bit as those phrases replayed in my mind, mending scars I hadn't realized were there. Once I ended the conversation, I lingered in my kitchen and wept for a solid hour. Yet it wasn't grief that brought the tears. It was liberation. It was the realization that finally somebody had affirmed I'm beyond just a mom, beyond a breadwinner, beyond an unpaid housekeeper. I'm a person with inherent worth. Robert's complexion had drained to a pale gray. Mom, don't rush into anything on account of tonight's mess. Michael could be spinning lines to suit your desires. Con artists are sly operators. Enough, I shouted, with a strength that startled me too. Quit meddling in my choices. Quit dictating my do's and don'ts. For 35 years, I've existed for your sakes. Every choice I've made revolved around your comfort, your prospects, your joy. After decades, I'm finally choosing something that puts me first. The quiet that ensued rang in my ears. Robert had sunk into a chair, cradling his head, weeping like a kid. Valerie stared at me, a blend of fury and dread in her expression, like she'd spotted an apparition. Know what else Michael shared? I pressed on, my assurance building with each syllable. He mentioned holding on to a snapshot of me from our 20s, the one in the white gown adorned with red blooms that I stitched myself. He confessed that over the years, particularly since losing his spouse, he'd gaze at it and ponder my well-being, whether I'd realize those goals. Robert glanced up, his eyes inflamed from the sobs. And your response? I gave him the honest account. I admitted there were joyful stretches, particularly during your early days, while your dad was around, when I believed we were crafting a wonderful thing called family. But I also confessed I'd given up so much of my essence along the way that I'd lost sight of who Shirley was before becoming Robert's parent, or Charles's grieving spouse. Valerie jumped to her feet suddenly like she'd been pricked by a bee. This is absurd. You can't head off with him. What will folks think? A lady your age pursuing lovesick escapades like some kid. I met her stare head-on and grinned with a calm I hadn't known in ages. Valerie, sweetheart, after this evening, others' opinions rank dead last for me. After all, if my flesh and blood sees me as lesser and ordinary, why sweat strangers' views? Robert mustered the will to chime in at last. Mom, if you're set on encountering Michael, if travel's your goal, we can back you. Just avoid doing it to get even. Don't wreck things merely to spite us. Wreck my existence, I echoed, stunned. Robert, can't you see? This isn't spite at all. This is about enduring. For the first time in ages, somebody's extending an opportunity for true joy, true regard, true love. For the real me, not my handouts. I strolled over to the window in the dining area and peered out at the road I'd called home for so long, where I'd nurtured my boy, where I'd laid so many aspirations to rest. Tomorrow, I'm dialing Mike. I decided to reach out to Michael and take him up on his offer. I'll purchase a flight, stuff a bag with my favorite outfits, and discover whether joy is still within reach at 70. The time after that meal turned into the most peculiar period of my existence. Robert attempted to phone me daily during the initial week, sending frantic voicemails to my machine. I shared details of my sewing career, the bridal gowns I'd designed, and the personal tales each customer had confided in me. It felt odd yet exhilarating to be engaging once more, to sense that another person cherished my past and recollections. Without a doubt, he mentioned on one of our evening chats, You've occupied my thoughts for 4 decades. During my wedding to my spouse, the arrivals of my children, the establishment of my business, there was always a piece of me pondering what might have unfolded had I mustered the courage to invite you to the States alongside me. His statements warmed me in a way I hadn't experienced in ages. Michael, you've crossed my mind often as well, I reflected, particularly amid hardships, like when your dad fell ill or when Robert began facing troubles. I pondered what my path might have looked like had I boarded that flight with you. He responded with the rich chuckle I recalled so vividly. It's never too late to explore that, right? The ticket rested on my bedside table, solid and inviting, like a vow of liberation. Takeoff on March 15th, bound for Seattle, Washington. Michael had pushed to cover the cost, but I turned down his suggestion. This choice is mine, my journey, I'd insisted. I intend to fund it myself. With the savings I'd scraped together over months, skipping treatments and proper meals, funds I'd now spend on something that could bring me contentment after years of none. 3 days prior to my departure, Robert appeared at my threshold. He appeared dreadful, haggard, with shadows etched beneath his eyes, his attire rumpled like he'd worn it through the night. "Mom, come on, let's discuss this," he pleaded in a fractured tone that, despite it all, tugged at my emotions. I allowed him inside, but maintained a guarded stance. "Where's Valerie?" I inquired while brewing coffee in my modest kitchen. "At her folks' place," he answered, dropping onto a seat with a thud. "She split a week back. Claims she can't stay if I'm jobless, if I can't sustain the life she expects." He let out a harsh chuckle. Apparently, her high and mighty mom isn't so lofty when money's involved. They advised her to handle it solo. A flicker of smugness hit me. Not exactly virtuous, but unavoidable. "So what's your plan moving forward?" "I've been hunting for employment frantically. I've sent applications to every spot imaginable. Mom, bureaus, eateries, shops, building sites, whatever. I'm ready for any gig." He lifted his gaze to mine, and I spotted an expression absent for years. True remorse. "I've started sessions at therapy, too. Discovered a local hub with no-cost support. I'm pleased to learn that, Robert," I replied sincerely. "That's a significant move." The counselor aided me in facing aspects of myself I'd ignored. He showed me how I've acted as an emotional and monetary drain, not only on you, but on anyone who's offered aid. His phrasing seemed polished, like he'd rehearsed it repeatedly before a glass. "And what insights did you gain in particular?" I probed, eager to gauge if this marked genuine progress or merely another ploy. Robert paused before responding, fidgeting with his mug anxiously. "I've realized I never developed accountability because you were always there to bail me out." "It's not on you," he hastened to clarify, noting my reaction. "It's my doing." But the habit formed young, and I never bothered to shatter it. I inclined my head thoughtfully. "And with Valerie, what did you uncover about your bond? That my attachment to her wasn't true affection, it was reliance. I thrived on her demands and judgments because they justified my immaturity, allowed me to remain the boy waiting for his mother to save the day." He halted and met my eyes squarely. "Mom, I get that I haven't earned your pardon. I recognize I've ruined what we had, but I need you to understand. For the first time as an adult, I'm gaining real clarity. And precisely, what do you perceive?" I ventured gently. "I perceive a 70-year-old lady who devoted her whole existence to a son who never recognized it. I see a lady who toiled tirelessly to afford me schooling and chances that I squandered. I see a lady who merits happiness, who merits appreciation, who merits pursuing her aspirations after years of pursuing mine." His remarks touched me deeply, yet they sparked wariness too. "Robert, I'm heartened you're contemplating these matters, but talk comes cheap. True transformation demands time and steady effort." "I get it," he affirmed, bobbing his head eagerly. "And I'm not paying this visit to urge you to scrap your voyage. I'm not seeking cash or assistance. I'm here to... I'll prove it to you through my actions that I can transform. even though you're not around anymore to witness it." "What exactly do you mean?" Robert rose from his chair and began walking back and forth in my tiny kitchen. "I found employment at a cleaning service. The shifts are overnight and the salary isn't much, but it's legitimate work that lets me afford a modest apartment I leased in the city center. Plus, I'm enrolling in virtual courses to earn a credential in bookkeeping." I stared at him, truly taken aback. "When did you choose to pursue all of this?" "The evening following our meal together. Once I returned home and Valerie began berating me for wrecking our money matters. A switch flipped inside me then. It hit me that at 35, I'd never taken charge of my existence, not even for one day." He settled back into his seat and grasped my hands gently. "Mom, you should head to Seattle, meet Michael, gaze at the sea, and finally pen that novel you've dreamed of for so long. You deserve happiness, even if it requires me stepping out of your world." For the first time since that dinner evening, it felt like I was conversing with my authentic son, not the scheming, reliant figure I'd dealt with over the years. "Robert, you'll forever remain in my life. You're my child, and that won't alter. But you have to grasp that our bond can't remain unchanged." "I get it entirely," he stated resolutely. "And I need you to realize that I'll strive to become a son you'd admire, regardless of how many years it demands, or if our connection is beyond mending by then." We remained quiet for a few moments, each immersed in private reflections. At last, Robert broke the hush. "Could you share details about Michael? What kind of person was he back in your younger days?" A smile crept onto my lips without warning. He was exceptionally smart, driven, and kind-hearted. There was something in him that made me sense I was the most captivating person alive. During our discussions, he'd concentrate solely on me, like my thoughts were the profoundest he'd ever encountered. "Why didn't you join him when he relocated to the States?" "Because fear held me back," I confessed. Fear of abandoning my familiar surroundings, fear of stumbling, fear that I wouldn't measure up to him. Then I encountered your dad, who offered safety, steadiness, and a routine existence. I hesitated briefly. "Choosing your father brings no regrets. He was a decent person, and we shared wonderful times. Yet now I have another opportunity to explore what might have unfolded had I shown more courage." Robert inclined his head thoughtfully. "Do you believe Michael has truly pondered you throughout these years? Or is he merely romanticizing memories?" His inquiry prompted deep reflection on my part. "You see, Robert, I've pondered that very thing each night since Michael reached out. Is his affection genuine, or are we simply two aging individuals glorifying a past romance?" I rose and approached the window, observing the garden where I'd sown those roses ages ago. But eventually it dawned on me that the nature of our emotions is irrelevant. "How can you say it's irrelevant?" Robert inquired, visibly intrigued. "Whether it's mere sentimentality, a glorified recollection, or authentic devotion doesn't change the key point. The vital thing is that after so many years, I feel vibrant again. I feel worthy. I feel like a woman entitled to pursuit, appreciation, and esteem." I faced him directly. "When did I last experience that sensation? When did someone last make me feel cherished simply for who I am?" Robert bowed his head, visibly embarrassed. "I never brought you that feeling, right? I always assumed you'd be there, readily accessible no matter my behavior." "Precisely. And you weren't alone in that, Robert. Your father did the same. As our marriage waned, he began viewing me solely as the one who prepared meals, tidied up, and nursed him through illnesses. I ceased to be Shirley and turned into merely Charles's spouse, then just Robert's parent. Right then, my phone buzzed. It was Michael phoning at our scheduled time, as usual. I glanced at Robert, who gave a nod of encouragement to pick up. "Hello, gorgeous," came Michael's voice over the line. A warm glow instantly filled my heart, as always. "How did your day go?" "Eventful," I answered, a smile breaking through the strain. "Robert's visiting. My son. Want to greet Michael." Robert hesitated briefly, but then gave a tentative affirmation. I switched to speaker mode. Michael, meet Robert, my boy. Robert, this is Michael Jenkins. Greetings, Robert. Yes, sir, it's tricky, but I'm beginning to see that my mom merits joy even if it upends our routine significantly. That's a remarkably grown-up perspective, Michael responded approvingly. Let me share this with you, Robert. I have 3 grown children, and it required ages for them to recognize that parents are full-fledged individuals with personal aspirations and requirements, not endless sources of aid and funds. Robert eyed me, astonished. Evidently, he hadn't anticipated Michael's blend of candor and empathy. Mr. Jenkins, Robert pressed on, might I inquire what are your plans regarding my mom? Michael let out a quiet laugh. That's a reasonable concern. My aim is to connect with the person that the young woman I loved 4 decades back turned into. I want to take her to lovely spots, meet my children, prepare meals for her, hear her tales, and maybe, if we're both on board, nurture a profound bond or even deeper. And if it doesn't pan out the way you hope, Robert inquired, then we'll have shared a wonderful journey. We'll have wrapped up a long, unfinished part of our lives. Plus, your mom will enjoy a much-needed break in Washington. No rush, Robert. No wild hopes. Simply 2 folks in our later years allowing themselves a shot at finding happiness again. Robert eased up noticeably. I appreciate your straightforwardness, sir. Just Michael, if you don't mind. And with that, if you'll pardon me, I need a private word with your mother. Robert agreed and headed to the den, leaving space for my call. How are you feeling post-chat with him? I wondered to Michael after we had the room to ourselves. Pretty positive. He strikes me as a guy in the midst of personal development. That reflects well on your parenting, no doubt. Kids who dodge challenges don't build toughness. His reassurance touched me deeper than anticipated. Michael, are you certain about stirring up your serene routine with a lady loaded with family chaos? Oh, sweetheart, at our stage, everyone's got some household turmoil. One of my boys split from his wife last year and returned home with his pair of little ones. My girl's navigating a life stage upheaval, phoning me in tears each Tuesday. The baby of the family battles an obsession with video games that's straining his relationship. He chuckled lightly. Such issues come with the territory. What counts is our approach to them, and you're tackling yours with solid limits, tough affection, and by keeping in mind that your grown children own their choices and outcomes. You're picking that up too, it looks like. Once the call with Michael ended, Robert and I kept chatting well into the evening. He shared more on his counseling, how he was spotting habits he'd looped through for years without notice. Guess what proved toughest to grasp in sessions? He posed over our second coffee. What? That it went beyond mere sloth or childishness. I'd formed a habit of craving emotional bailouts. Each bailout on an issue, each handout of cash or escape from a jam brought this rush of bliss, like hitting a high. His admission struck deep. So how do you kick that habit? By owning the fallout from my choices sans saviors. After getting fired last, my gut urge was to rush here with a pitiful tale. But not this round. I crashed in my vehicle for 3 days till landing the janitorial gig. You slept in your car. My instinctive parent worry kicked in as I asked. Yep. And it ranked among the pivotal moments for me. I finally got what it's like without a fallback. What real repercussions from my moves feel like. He met my gaze steadily. Mom, those 3 evenings had me reflecting heaps on you. On every instance, you picked my wants over yours, and you always did. That's motherhood, Robert. Nah, Mom. That's moms who skip healthy limits, and sons who miss out on adult accountability. He shifted closer. The counselor showed me that your endless rescues, though well-meant, robbed me of chances to mature. His insight stung, yet it liberated too. For so long, guilt had gripped me whenever I pondered refusing Robert or prioritizing myself. Now I saw my giving as a subtle hold, keeping him reliant. What's next then? I murmured gently. Next, I'll demonstrate to myself first, Then you, that I can step up as a mature person, handle my expenses, call my shots, tackle my hurdles, and by your return from Seattle, if you choose to, I'll be a son worth boasting about. And if I opt to remain there." Robert grinned, and for the first time in ages, his smile held real delight, not scheming. "Then I'll cheer you on, drop by when possible, ring weekly, and chase my path, secure in knowing you're chasing yours." The morning I left broke bright with blue skies and a soft wind murmuring hints of upcoming escapades. Robert showed up promptly to drive me to the airfield, and for the first time in years, ease flowed between us. He'd arrived with blooms, a modest bunch of white daisies I recognized as my preferred. He penned a short note and handed me an envelope sealed tight. "Save it for the flight," he instructed, his grin a bit bashful. It's words I had to share, but putting them on paper feels less daunting than voicing them. On the way to the terminal, our chat meandered through ordinary topics: the forecast, current events, his upcoming schedule. It felt like a straightforward exchange between parent and child, a rarity after so long. No begging, no theatrics, no blame. Just a serene dialogue shared by grown-ups who cared deeply, yet grasped the value of proper limits. At the arrivals area, he turned to me and said, "Mom, whatever unfolds in Seattle, this journey has already paid off." "How so?" "Watching you buzz with anticipation, jitters, and delight. It's been ages since I've seen that spark in you." He assisted with unloading my luggage from the vehicle, a bag I'd meticulously filled with my favorite outfits, among them a fresh coral pink dress purchased just for the occasion. Robert escorted me right up to the checkpoint. As farewell approached, we embraced fiercely, echoing the closeness from his childhood days. "Love you, Mom," he murmured softly. "Enjoy yourself. Let romance bloom. Find joy. No one merits it more. I love you back, my boy, and I'm so proud of who you're turning into." Aboard the aircraft, my fingers shook as I unsealed his message. The script, once so scribbled, now appeared steadier and more deliberate. "Dear Mom," it opened, "these recent days have had me reflecting on the countless ways you played the unsung savior. The extra hours you logged at work to cover my textbooks, the time you parted with your brand new sewing machine for my bike, the evenings you masked your own hunger to ensure I ate plenty, the nights you kept vigil when illness struck, those quiet acts of devotion I overlooked. I get it now. Motherhood isn't about erasing yourself through endless sacrifice. It's about caring so profoundly that you foster self-reliance. It's about summoning courage to release when the moment arrives. Thanks for caring deeply enough to allow my maturity. Soar, Mom, both in the skies and beyond. All my affection and admiration. Robert." P.S. Michael is fortunate beyond words to encounter the world's most remarkable woman. Salty drops traced my face as I tucked the note away. Gazing out the window, the sky's vastness unfolded endlessly. For the first time in ages, my path ahead mirrored that boundless expanse. Michael greeted me at Seattle's gate, clutching a bunch of sunny yellow roses and flashing a beam I knew instantly, despite the deeper lines and snow-white locks. Spotting me, his expression burst into the very glee from our university years. "Without a doubt," he murmured during our embrace, "you surpass even my fondest memories of your beauty." The ensuing weeks unfolded like a fantasy. He guided me along the Pacific shoreline, where I first witnessed the sea's endless reach. He presented his children, who embraced me with sincere kindness that touched my soul. His youngest, Carmen, remarked, "Dad's grin hasn't been this wide since Mom passed. You've revived his light. Thank you." Each evening, Michael prepared intricate meals that we relished outdoors as the sun dipped low. Forget the retired engineer label. I'm merely Michael, the fellow who adored a sparkling young woman 4 decades back and held on to that feeling forever. Those sentiments pierced me, mirroring my own emotions toward him. I wasn't merely Robert's devoted parent, nor Charles's grieving spouse, nor the weary tailor. I was Shirley, full of tales to share, aspirations to pursue, and affection to offer. As my stay in Seattle drew to a close, Michael posed an offer that reshaped my view of possibilities after 70. I can't bear for this to conclude. It's wild, I realize. We're rediscovering one another after all these years, yet I'd like you to ponder relocating here. No rush to wed, no pressure to cohabit if it's not your wish, just a shot at crafting something special in our later chapter. My initial reaction swirled with obstacles. My home, my sparse circle of acquaintances, my routine back east. But Robert's note surfaced in my mind, along with his encouragement to reach for the heights. Valerie's subtle dismissals replayed too, and the decades I'd devoted to others, sidelining my desires. And if it falls apart, I ventured, then we've savored a wondrous escapade. But what if it succeeds? What if, after years of prioritizing everyone else, you seize the chance for utter fulfillment? That evening, I rang Robert to discuss Michael's idea. His reply caught me off guard and swelled my heart with admiration. "Mom, does he bring you joy?" "More than I have in years. He cherishes me. He honors who I am. It makes me feel truly appreciated each day. So stay. Craft the existence you truly merit. I'll manage just fine. Actually, I'll thrive even more, secure in the knowledge that you're at last pursuing your own fulfillment." 6 months on, I found myself boxing up my treasured possessions from the old home, preparing for a full relocation to Seattle. Robert assisted throughout the ordeal, revealing a level of grown-up poise and dependability that sparked optimism about his path ahead. Guess what's the most paradoxical twist in this whole saga? He remarked, while we sorted through the snapshots of our family. "What, that in releasing you, it seems I've reclaimed you in a real sense. Not as the parent who forever bails me out, but as the remarkable individual you've always been, someone I overlooked getting to know properly." As I pen this account from Michael's veranda, gazing at the Pacific waves and awaiting his return from the store with supplies for the meal we'll prepare side by side, I contemplate the profound shifts that have unfolded. Robert's carving out a solid future for himself. He's advanced in his career. He's settled into a superior living space and is seeing a lady who pushes him toward growth rather than feeding his reliance. Valerie, as he shared, tied the knot with a mature fellow able to support her way of life, a move that's likely ideal for all involved. And for me, I've come to realize it's never too late to embrace joy. I've discovered that prioritizing oneself isn't self-centered. It's the bedrock for nurturing others in balanced ways. I've seen that a woman of 70 can embark on escapades, discover romance, reinvent her world. Michael and I exchanged vows just last month in an intimate beachside gathering, with his children and Robert standing by as witnesses. Robert wept all through it, yet those were happy tears. "I never imagined witnessing my mom wed for genuine affection," he confided later. "I figured your union with Dad was purely practical for the sake of kin. Looking back on that awful evening when Valerie shamed me right in my house, I now view it as the ultimate boon, since that embarrassment ultimately roused me from slumber. That embarrassment revealed I merited greater things. That embarrassment ignited the bravery to pursue the bliss I believed was gone for good. And you, what if fate handed you another shot at utter contentment? Would you seize it regardless of others' judgments? Trust me, it's never too late to begin anew.